everybody, and welcome to Pro Tips. My name is Wade Acuff, and I'll be your host today. We've got a grab bag of illustration tips that's coming up. We're going to be talking about blend modes, my favorite blend modes for lighting, and some other goodies. But before we get into it, I want to say hello to chat. What's up, chat? Hi, Sam. What's up, Robert? Megan, how's it going, everybody? What's up, Cody Bear? Let's get off of this. I think I'm blurred right now. Oh, terrible. Okay, well, let's get things into sharper focus. We're gonna get started here. All right, so first I want to talk about lighting, and let's bring up our sphere. Okay, yes, we have a sphere, but I want to talk about light direction. And this is just I'm gonna show you a couple little tips about just keeping track of your lighting direction. And the way I like to do it is with cones. And when I say that, I mean drawing cones. And I'm just going to draw real quick a little cone. And the reason I'm drawing a cone instead of like an arrow, like this, is it gives me 3D information. And we're going to talk a little bit about drawing in 3D as well. As you can see, there is a lit sphere. So a cone is a good way to keep track of this throughout your illustration. It's one of those things where I don't use it as much now, but really helped starting out. I still use it. If I get stuck, I will definitely make sure I have a cone standing by. Another way to do this, and it does still take advantage of the 3D aspect of it is, and you may have seen me do this. I did an illustration stream, I think it was back in May, and I did this same technique. Well, if I could grab there we go. And then I'm going to select all of these, redistribute them evenly, and then merge them down with a controller command E. And then I'm going to put little arrows on the end of these. And then the magic is controller command T to transform. And then you can move this into place. Obviously, you don't have a lit sphere a lot of times at the start of your illustration, but the point is you can make this a 3D object, 3D looking object, still 2D, two-dimensional, but you get the same idea. It's a little bit more intrusive than the cone, but this was something I also used early on just so I could like mentally think of where my lighting is coming from. So there's a few little tips on keeping track of your lighting. I'm gonna leave the cone on for us. Let me check in chat. Yes, I had a fuzz face, I know. I think I still do. Let me see if I can fix it. Oh. Hey, that's a little better. Okay, so moving into a little bit of a rendering practice, just so you know what this sphere is for. I did provide some brushes, or there will be some brushes provided for you. I think Cody has the link for that. And I'm just going to walk through this real quick. I have a soft brush, let me see if this is the right layer. Let me add a new layer. This is a soft side, hard side, soft side brush, where the brush changes depending on the stroke. If you go down, it's on the left. The hard edge is on the left. If you go up, it's on the right. But you don't have to use that. You could use this with a hard round brush, as long as you have a smooth. I have a preset also in that brush pack that is the smudge tool, and you can just use that to create the same kind of hard edge, soft edge. And let me show you why we need that. So this was what that would make. Bad example, but I'm going to use that soft edge brush. So we can start using this sphere. The whole idea is to use this sphere as a way to sculpt. Yes, sculpt. So you're thinking in 3D. You're looking at the lighting direction. You're making marks and making lines that are grabbing, in this case, grabbing the shadow as it rolls around the edge of that sphere. It's a lot to think about, but it's really simple to do once you start playing around with it. And I'm just adding a little bit of highlight to one edge of this, and actually grabbing, just using the eyedropper to grab this, grab the light that's coming away from the highlight, because if I grab the highlight it may be too bright, but it just depends on how high that area is off of the surface. So that could work for us. Let me grab my preset again, and I'm just going to smudge this out a little bit. So you start to get little shapes and little things. I think that's still too bright for that, but if I wanted to add a bump, and this is all just for rendering practice, like literally make a sphere, or grab one of these, there's tons of these on the internet, bring it into Photoshop and just try and use this lighting that's provided to give you an idea of how to work in 3D. And I'm just doing a little cast shadow, smudging that out. So I'm adding little bumps, and I can come down and just think how these bumps would look as they get closer to the front of the sphere. It really is just a practice, and we're not going to stay too long on this, but just the idea of practicing this. It's actually a lot of fun once you kind of get in the groove of it. And let's bump it up a notch. I'm going to take this, I'm going to add a new layer. Let me make sure I'm not missing. Love that smudge fudge tool, yes. All right, just checking in on chat. Okay. So I think the last time I did this in that illustration stream, I think I made a nose or something like that. In this case, let's do an eye, and I will literally just draw an eye, and I am picking, I have to make sure I'm on a brush, I am picking the core shadow to start with, because I'm just going to draw the eye shape, just straight up, try not to make it too generic, but just an eye shape. And we essentially have the start for our eye shape, but I want to start thinking about how this light wraps around. So if this were an eye, there would be a brow ridge. So I'm just going to pretend like this is the side of the face, and I guess this is maybe the right eye. We can pull this over, and it's already starting to feel like, oh, okay, I see this. So I'm going to grab this core shadow again and just add this eyelid rolling over. And I think the lid would be casting a shadow even, just because of the position of the light. So we get a little bit there. I think even the bottom lid eye would have that little bit of, like, you can kind of see, I have a big one right now, but there's a little bit of a under ridge to the eye. You can even start getting into where the brow hits the nose area. I'm not going to get too much into that. You can use that smudge brush too to kind of help your shadows out. And then when you start popping in some of these highlights, it really starts to jump out. I'm just going to add a little bit of a highlight to this. Maybe even a little bit up here, as if that's the brow. And the eyeball itself would have a bit of a shadow going on. We could add an eye, an iris, and here, let's try it. Let's try it. It may get creepy, but we're not going to be on this too long. And then even that would have a highlight, something like that. You probably even have a little bit of a highlight on this top of the bottom eyelid. That's a sentence. Okay, so that's just some practice. I recommend trying to do this. It really does let you know what you need to work on as well, as you're progressing and trying to make things, or if that's your style. This is not particularly like a style thing. It will also help with your 2D work, I promise you. Regardless of what kind of illustration you do, understanding lighting can really help you out and go a long way. But let's move on to lighting with blend modes and just how I like to use them. Let's move away from the sphere for right now. Let's see, let's pull up our generic what are blend modes list. There we go. So if you've ever pulled up the blend modes in a layer like this, you'll see all these separate divided areas, and they're broken down. This is just a simple breakdown. You can find lots more information on this. In fact, if Cody, if you want to drop the other link for Jesus Ramirez, the Photoshop Learning channel has an amazing breakdown of how the blend modes work. We wouldn't have the time to go into that anyway, and I wouldn't have the knowledge to go through every one of them like they do on the Photoshop Learning channel. But breaking it down real simple, we have darken area, which I will be using multiply out of that area. We have lighten, which all of these in that section will lighten the image. And you have contrast, and then comparison inversion, and then component, where I do use color sometimes. We're not going to be talking about that because that's less of a lighting thing. But today we are going to focus on multiply, color dodge, and overlay. So let's jump into that. I'm going to use an illustration as an example, one that I did a while back. Officially, I don't think I ever really finished it, but this is what we're using. And the first one I want to jump into is our multiply mode. Typically used for shadows. I would say anytime you're working with any blend modes, just roll through them all, just to check it out, see what you want. After a while, you'll figure out which ones you like to use and for what techniques, and that's how I found that these three are kind of my go-to for lighting. But let's set this one to multiply. Yeah, there we go. And I'm just going to use my eyedropper to select a shadow, and then I'm just going to go into a little bit more saturated color. And oh yeah, before we do that, how about we'll make another cone. I'm going to kind of fudge the lighting a little bit on this one. I'm just going to draw a cone so that I can show you which direction I'm taking the light from this. So we've got our little cone here. Back to the multiply layer, back to our bluish color. And I'm just going to start painting in a harder shadow. That's all I'm doing here. So I'm just kind of following the lines of the cone. It's a little front facing, but I'm going to get this box is kind of turned away from us. But we want to have some shadow in the box. And this is really rough, really loose. This is just to demo this. You could also get the shadow going over the character. Of course, the hat. The character casts the shadow itself. Maybe a little bit there. Of course, don't forget the cat and the little bottle here. All right, so you could take the time, and if these were separate characters and you knew that you were going to come back and correct them. In fact, Sam, if he's still in chat, did a great pro tips on how he works with his character and lighting, separating out all the individual things. But for this is just demoing how I use these shadows. Now, if you look at this, when I turn it off, you'll see that it's just a smudgy mess. But when I turn it back on, it's blending, it's making those pixels darker. And it will work with any, even if I go to a lighter shade, it's gonna make the pixels for the base layer darker, because that's what multiply does. It pushes those pixels darker, regardless of the color. All right, so that's the multiply. We're gonna move, I'm gonna name this shadows. And then I'm gonna move into lighting. I'll just call it light. And then we're going to use overlay for this. I like overlay because what overlay does is it really adjusts the midtones darker or lighter depending on the value you're using. So it's going to just mess mainly with the midtones, and using that for lighting, I'll I'll show you. It's fairly dramatic, fairly quickly. Not as dramatic as color dodge, which we'll see later, but as we get into this, here we go. I'm just going to paint some big swaths of light. And I've chosen a really warm tone, and I'm just kind of filling in the little areas I think the light would hit. I'll come on the foreground a little bit just to lighten this area up. And then you start dipping into hitting the characters with it as well, just so everybody gets a taste. Probably take that off a little bit there. But that's the idea. And you can see this just with a little bit of that overlay layer hitting the the lighter tones in the image. It pushes them even brighter. Even if I turn this to just grayscale and I turn this off and on, you can see that difference. And just to show you, let me turn this back. Just to show you, if I go past this mid-gray, if I start going into a darker value, it's going to make a darker value. It's going to push those mid-tones and the darker tones to a darker value. So it's kind of a workhorse in the sense that if you want to darken something or lighten something, you could use the same layer. So you get that option there, and you can see if I go grayscale again, you'll see that the dark area at the top, light area at the top lightens and the dark area at the bottom darkens. When I turn this on, just like that. Let's see if I can go back. There we go, that's fine. All right, so that is how I would use overlay. Just turn down the tunes a bit loud. Thanks for that. Sorry, just seeing this. Appreciate you. Paco, thank you much. Let me check and see if there's any questions. Okay, and moving on to color dodge. There's a couple of things with color dodge I want to show you. Adding a new layer here, and I'm just going to call this dodge. So color dodge is a bit wild. It's really great for a lot of things. I know that, in fact, popular opinion, I do use color dodge, but I'm going to use it for lighting here. And if we were to make God rays, you could use color dodge to do that. There are lots of ways to do this, but I just wanted to show you. It's not going to be the best example, but I'll just start painting some kind of God rays kind of coming in, which is just a lighting term for those rays of light from the sun usually. But it's I'm really very lightly just touching the Wacom tablet for this. Because what the color dodge is going to do is it's going to saturate the tones and really blow out your highlights. So if I really start bearing down on this, you can see that's not good. That's not what we want. But what that is really good for is rendering metal. I know we're talking about lighting, but if I come over here and I'm just going to grab something really saturated and I start hitting this blade, this little axe or whatever that's in shadow, it's really going to punch that out. So it's really good for metal. And real quick, I want to show you back on the sphere, just because I have to mention this. If you are using color dodge, and I'll go ahead and, oh, hello. Uh-oh. What is happening? Okay, I think we're going to be okay. Color dodge. All right. So if you're using color dodge and you're painting, let's go into something like this. Let's say we have the sphere. I just want you to know that the fill really does have a major effect with color dodge. There are some blend modes where fill gives you a different effect than opacity. If I just go down on the opacity, it just fades it out, just like you think it should. But if you leave opacity all the way 100% and you start to fill, you'll see that the red, in this case, the red starts to creep up towards the highlight. It's just a different effect that's happening there. So pay attention to that with the fill when you're using color dodge. All right, so let's see. We actually can try that here. I'm going to take the fill down in those God rays. But it's a good way to get the nice little like red edge to a lot of things. A lot of times I'll use that. But let's jump into this, and I want to show you another thing that you might want to pay attention to. There's a lot of talented photographers on Behance and just all over the place, and they're always working with images. They're always doing things creative, just coming up with ways, techniques, and all sorts of things that you can apply to your illustrations. It's the same thing. A lot of times it's the exact same thing. So pay attention to anybody out there that's using Lightroom in a fun way, or anything that you would typically think photographers would be using. You can probably use it for illustration as well. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to add a technique you've probably seen before, but we're going to come in here and add a 50% gray layer and turn this to overlay. And if you remember what we talked about with overlay, it's really just going to push and pull the midtones, lighter or darker depending. So if I turn this off or on with overlay checked, you're not going to see any changes in the image. Not until we go beyond that 50% gray, either lighter or darker. So what am I going to do here? I'm going to use our burn and dodge tools, and I'm going to change the lighting. Let me bump in here a little bit. So I'm going to grab our, let's see, burn this here, just making a little shadow, making it look like it's peeking around the shadow of this. I'm going to act like the light is coming from the front, and I'm just going to start coming here and painting, building this up. Right now my dodge and burn, both of these are set to midtones, but you're not affecting any midtones because you're only painting on gray, so it's just going to be affecting that mid gray, just to let you know how that's working right now. And it's also very non-destructive. This is just a layer I can turn off and on. It's super easy. Get that to taste as you like it. And then you can come in here and bump in the shadows. If you want to increase the shadows at all. Pop out just a little bit. And so turning this off and on, you can see, it's already a massive difference. But the layer looks like this. This is all we've done. So, it's just pretty wild. And this was a technique I picked up ages ago. I don't even remember from where, but I've seen it since then tons of times. And you can also just come in here and start using this smudge brush if you want to smudge things out. And I'm just affecting it this way. Let's see. So yeah, that's going to be it for the tips. But what I want to do right now? I want to throw in a color dodge again, just to show that lighting with color dodge is really nice. I'm going to get a super saturated green, and I'm going to jump in here and let's see. Am I still on? Oh yeah, let me make sure I'm on the brush. And then I'm just gonna start adding more green to this. And I was working on this the other day, just kind of checking it out, making sure I had everything set. And after I finished, I was like, this is much better than when it started. Like however long I finished this, like years ago. But yeah, this is just a dodge layer, and it's super powerful. Be careful, it will blow out the highlights. But that is going to do it for us today. Let me check on chat to make sure that I didn't have any questions. I think we're good. Wait, hold on, let's see. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so that is going to do it for us today. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. And stick around. I believe we have Hank Washington coming up next for more illustration goodness. And then I will be back later on as well. So we'll see you soon. Take care until then. Bye, everybody.